welcome to the show, Jen and Leslie. I'm so happy that you joined me today. So as I said, this PANDAS sort of popped up in my feed on Facebook. I saw a friend going through it and she was really struggling and it seemed a little obscure. And then I saw it again and again and again. So it seems like it's something that is really on the rise. Mm-hmm. So tell me your story with it first, Jen.
Ours is a pretty new journey. It began December 3rd. Overnight, my 5-year-old developed OCD. So a lot of times when people think of OCD, they think neat and orderly and hand washing. That's right. That can be part of it, but intrusive, unwanted thoughts. Mm-hmm. So overnight, I was putting her to bed. It'd kind of been like bubbling a few days before, but it was worried thoughts, anxious thoughts, nervous thoughts, and it got really scary. And the final thought before I put her to bed was, Mommy, my mind is telling me, imagine I was dead.
Oh, my God.
So I was shaking, and I closed her bedroom door, and I went online, and I Googled acute onset OCD. And PANDAS was the first thing that came up. Mm-hmm. And I'd heard of it. I don't know, just in passing, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know much about it. But I knew in my core that this is what she'd had. So there's other symptoms like frequent urination and urge to pee. So that day she felt like she had to pee 30 times. So of course you're thinking UTI, but so with the intrusive thoughts and the urge to pee and the clinginess and the fear, and she was just so scared, I knew this is what she had. So the next day.
Did she have strep at that point?
So no. So she a week before had a cold. So we thought it was a run-of-the-mill cold. She said, I have a sore throat. Mm-hmm. I didn't think anything of it. Strep's never been something that's been in our house as far as I know. But she started coughing, no fever or anything. So we just gave her inhaler. She's kind of prone to asthma, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So she was sick for 4 or 5 days, but we never went to the doctor. So that was about, a week and a half before this OCD onset. So
were you at that moment, were you associating those two together, this cold she had with when you did that, when you searched that, you made
when
the
I
connection?
Read that, I was like, this makes total sense. That's the infection. Mm-hmm. A week and a half later, here she is with this sudden acute onset OCD. And I knew I had caught it super, super early because from everything I had read, sometimes it's years before people know. And I also was reading about how bad it can get quickly. So that's why I took her to Emerge.
So, I mean, now there's not a lot of comparison here, but I did a little bit of reading about this before we got in here. And so it reminds me a little bit of Lyme disease in that it needs to be caught early and dealt with, or the effects of it are long-term.
Yeah, I think the earlier you catch it, the better. Like if the brain gets super inflamed and the longer you're in that state, the harder it's going to be to course correct and get back to your baseline of where your kid is at.
Okay.
And Lyme can actually
is
be
a huge trigger. Yeah, Lyme is a big trigger.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to come back. Mm-hmm. But Leslie, I want to hear your story because you have not just one child, but two.
Yeah. I have 3 children altogether, 2 affected. So my eldest is 15 now, and the youngest is 7. They're the 2 that are affected. And my 15-year-old, even back to kindergarten, we can remember times where he just had transient tics, or so we were told, transient tics, big blinking outbursts, or he would say something and then and it would go away. And then it would, 6 months later, all of a sudden he would be repeating whatever he said under his breath. So he would say a sentence and then repeat it quietly under his breath. And I was like, that's strange. What is he doing? And then the worst time was right before his 10th birthday. He all of a sudden couldn't stop repeating the word okay. Like he was just saying okay over and over and over, like hundreds of times a minute. We were trying to watch a show once, and I had him in the bed with me just to kind of observe him, and he was like, okay. It was that frequent, and I knew then, I was like, there's something really wrong. So I'd taken him to the doctors, and we had talked about transient tics, and a lot of boys, 25% of boys, adolescent and young boys can get transient tics. So it was kind of swept under the carpet as that for a while until the OKs. And then we got sent to a pediatrician who told us that he had mild Tourette syndrome. And even that pediatrician said to me that may get worse with strep. And I had never heard of PANDAS. I'd never seen this pediatrician before. So I came home, told my husband of the diagnosis. I said that apparently when he gets strep throat, it's going to get worse. And that was the end of it. I thought that just when he got sick, it would get worse. But it definitely wasn't a PANDAS diagnosis. That was in January that we got that in 2015. And then in like June of 2015, our youngest, she was 2.5, had been out during the day with her grandparents. And she came home at 5 in the afternoon, and they're standing in the hall, and she's blinking so bad. Like her whole head is going, and it wasn't just a blink, it was a whole face blink. And I said, has she been doing that all day? And my father-in-law was like, yeah. And I was like, what is going on? So we observed her for a few days, and then she started to get a speech block. So she was at 2.5 stringing together 7 words, where is my doll, mummy, I am hungry, just that stage. And she couldn't even get a full word out. She was like, like they were stuck. And she would say, my words are stuck. Those were her description of what was happening. So I took her to the doctor, to our family doctor, and thank the Lord, he had a grandson that was autistic. And autism and PANDAS affect the same area of the brain. So he had heard of it. And he said, I think your daughter and perhaps your son have PANDAS. And this is a controversial diagnosis. Brace yourself, Leslie. He'd been my doctor for my whole life, so he knew me well enough to say that. You're going to hate the treatment. It's long-term antibiotics. And he knew, I'm a natural person. I'm raising my kids vegetarians. Like, that was a nightmare to me. And said, this is what we have to try. And we immediately put her on a month of erythromycin, which is normally a 5-day course. And I didn't see any results until we had about 30 days of erythromycin in her. But her first course of action was 6 months of erythromycin every day, something we usually only treat for 5 days.
Right. That's a crazy amount of antibiotics, right? And then, you'd be worried about sort of the side effects of that as well.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So your son, do you think he had this for quite a long time then?
I do.
And so was strep a recurring thing for him?
So this is where, when your kids are young, the stats say that a school-age child can have strep once a year. So I don't know if strep, and a lot of kids, like Jen and I were speaking before, sometimes strep is the initial trigger. And then there's another subset of disease. The other subset is called PANS. And that's just when any sort of immune response causes a flare. So if a child has Lyme, then they're more of a PANS. If they have, it can be seasonal allergies can trigger a flare. Anything can trigger a flare, really. Losing a tooth. The bacteria that losing a tooth will trigger a child's immune system, and then it will attack their brain.
Is that because the strep is in their system,
it's kind of already weakened the immune system? The immune system's already confused, and it's already gone. Like, when the immune system, it's an overreaction of the immune system.
Yeah, so it's an autoimmune condition. Like because a lot of people think it's the bacteria itself that is causing the symptoms, but it's your body, and your body attacks your brain. So your brain is inflamed, and so there can be so many triggers. So getting to know what your child's triggers are, it's a lot of journaling. It's a process of elimination. There are blood tests that can show certain things for sure. But
hard to get.
It's hard to get. It's hard to get those tests done.
So Jen, when you realize this, and you in your heart of hearts, this is PANDAS. This is what's happening.
Yep.
What happened next? What happens next?
So, because this is still controversial, I keep saying this is like the fibromyalgia of the pediatric world, like in the sense
funny
of
it is.
of like, oh, you have fibromyalgia. So there's a bit of a hysterical mother lens that you're looked at through by a lot of medical professionals. So, I went in there and I was torn. I was like, part of me doesn't want to tell them that I have Google diagnosed this, because doctors hate that anyway. But the other part of me, like, I have to mention it. So I tried to do it as diplomatically as possible. And hey, look, I know that you probably hear this a lot. I feel very strongly that this is PANDAS. And they, in Emerge, the docs kind of said, well, that isn't really, and I was like, okay, please check her out. So, to be fair, they did a thorough assessment. they have to look for other things too. Is this a brain tumor? You know, does she have like issues, motor issues?
Well, I looked at some of the symptoms, and they are vast.
Yeah.
And can vary in intensity.
Yeah.
So I would think for the medical community, it must be hard to look at that and then, because you would be looking for lots of different, explanations for this, right? It's not like there's just one
For
place
sure.
where this fits. So
For
that's
sure.
part of the struggle, right?
So I think that, they and please do check for all those things.
Of course.
I was glad she was assessed, and I was very relieved. It wasn't a brain tumor and those kinds of things. So, but at the same time, you can quickly eliminate things, and there are blood tests and swabs and strep tests that you can do, and if you have these symptoms and it's not this or this or this is what it is.
Yeah.
And let's get on it and let's get treating it ASAP. Even though I brought her in within 24 hours, it still took us a month to find a doctor to finally give us a prescription for antibiotics. So it makes me wonder, would we have gotten as deep into the trenches of hell had we had the antibiotics right off the top?
So I read somewhere that it was, it needed to be caught early, and that sort of those first 6 weeks were critical. And it took you 4 weeks. So where are you at now as we sit? We're in February now. Where are we at now with your daughter?
So we're still not through our first flare. We haven't reached baseline consistently. We've had good days. So there was a period of time, Christmas was hell. That was peak bad. We're talking so the emotional liability, the rages, so it went from the OCD, and then basically every symptom on that list, check, 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 and it just got worse and worse and worse. So,
Tell me some of the symptoms.
So the frequent urination, and then they're like, well, has she peed her pants yet? And I'm like, well, no.
Yet.
Sure enough, leaving the doctor's office that day, she peed her pants. She hasn't peed her pants since she was 2.
Right.
Then the rages, the emotional liability, that's been the hardest. It's like anything can set her off. You look at her the wrong way. Her brother uses a tone that's a little too playful. She will and then just the screaming and the shrill and her pupils. She looks like, I said to the naturopath that we ended up seeing, I said, she looks like she's stoned. My daughter looks like she's done mushrooms. Her pupils are that freaking big. And so scared and fight or flight, and the rapid thoughts and the reassurance, and then the compulsions of the OCD of counting on her fingers started. So she did start developing compulsions to go along with the intrusive thoughts. So it's just everything on that list. But the rages were the hardest and most heartbreaking thing. And the depression, she's all in her peak bad. Mommy, I wish I could trade brains with you. She'd wake up. The first thing she'd say is, Mommy, I'm still not happy. Mommy, make me happy. Mommy, make me happy. Yeah. She's like, I can't smile. And she's taking her fingers and she's pushing the corners of her mouth up. And you used to be able to make me happy. Why can't you make me happy? And
it's heartbreaking.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. She knows that she's not feeling herself. So we did also start seeing a cognitive behavior therapist, and so identifying and explaining to her that this is the OCD. They often encourage children to name the OCD so they can separate it from themselves. So give it a name like the bully or Clarence, whatever. You just name your OCD so you can separate it from yourself. So my husband and I are doing sessions because at such a young age, it's up to us to have the tools to teach her.
Remind me again how old she is.
She's 5.
Right. So she must be frustrated though, because she likely recognizes that this is not her.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She knows it's not her. She hates feeling this way. And the depression, the joy, she doesn't want to go skating. She doesn't want to play outside. She doesn't want to play dolls. She doesn't want to color. Anything she'd like to do before, she had no desire to do. So this was all pre-antibiotic. This is the lowest of the low over Christmas. Finally, after Christmas, after a middle of the night rage, because that was another one. Has she had a middle of the night rage yet? I was like, for God's sakes, how many boxes do you want to tick on this list before you give me some freaking antibiotics? Some doctors give it to you like candy. Yeah. And here I am in a psychiatric distress with my daughter, and you won't freaking, can we just try it? Even if I'm wrong, even if the crazy lady's wrong, give her some freaking drugs. So anyway, after a middle of the night rage, I finally hunted down the email of a doctor that I could get in touch with. And anyway, she reviewed her file and emailed the prescription to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist sent it to our Yeah. So anyway, she started the antibiotic at the end of December. The first 5 days, no difference really. Really disheartening. And then day 4 or 5, we started to see like an upswing. And then we're operating at 80%. So I've color-coded days, red, yellow, green. So we're in some green days now, some good days.
That's great.
So that was amazing. And I was like, okay, this is great. But then as soon as she went off them, crash back down. So now, like, we're working with a doctor now who kind of specializes in PANDAS, and he's functional and integrated medicine doctor. And so he looks at it from all angles. And so now I emailed him. I was like, she's crashing. He's like, okay, let's start her on a second course. So now she's on a 6-week dose of clavulin, which is a different antibiotic. So it attacks other bacteria. And we're seeing some really great days. So it is working. The other thing is Advil. So Advil as
the Advil
needed.
rescue.
The Advil rescue. So all the parents and all the message board groups, they know.
I love Advil, probably obviously for different reasons, but I love Advil.
It works. And so when you see them starting,
amazing
the pupils are getting big and they're starting to get like, oh, they're going to have a rage or an episode, or you give them the Advil and it takes the edge off.
So it's like similar to popping an aspirin, you know. I'm hearing what you're saying about your child, and I completely empathize with what you must be going through as a parent. So as a parent, where do you turn? What did you do? Who did you talk to? Because this has got to be incredibly isolating for starters, because you've got the medical community, some of the medical community, you know, doing that. They're there, dear.
Yes.
Right? And no doubt you have probably friends and family who are doing this as well, you know, questioning your parenting, and this is maybe behavioral, and it's got nothing to do with, you know, this. So where did you turn in this moment?
I went online because, like you said, it was very isolating because we had to educate everybody. You know, first we're learning about it ourselves, and then to enable your closest people to support you, you need to educate them on what's happening. And that was so overwhelming. I found that the information I didn't realize, or I didn't know as much information as our support group needed, which added to them feeling like it maybe wasn't something, because I didn't know. So I went online and I found Facebook mom groups. And thank God I did, because that was a lifesaver for me to be able to connect to other people that were dealing with the exact same things. And in my case, had other multi-siblings affected, which was so great, because I thought, again, part of me was like, well, maybe they both have Tourette's. I doubted it until I started speaking to other people. And then once I made that connection with other moms that had many children affected, some people have 3 affected, that was like, okay, this has been what we're dealt with. You know, we're going to have to deal with that. And then I decided, damn it, I'm going to educate everybody. So, so then I
steps up to pulpit.
Yeah.
Welcome to my TED Talk.
Yeah. And I thought I'm going to write an article or a post or something, and I did for the Yummy Mummy Club and submitted it, and they published it. And thank God, because it was through that post that I really connected with the community. A lot of people reached out to me then.
Once you start speaking online, I didn't for the first 3 weeks. In my head, I was like, it was hell. I was like, I'm going to go through this, and then when we're done, because I also am a freelance parenting writer and blogger and in social media a lot, and I talk about a lot of these things, but I was like, no, I'm too in it right now. It's too raw. I'm going to go through it, and then I'll write about it. But then it wasn't getting any better. And I was like, I need to tell my world, my people, what's going on, because like if you see me at work, I will just start crying. And so Anyway, CBC actually did an interview with a woman in Calgary named Marnie, and she is a big, big advocate for awareness for PANDAS. They had to go to the States for their child to get care, but now Calgary is really leading the way with their children's hospital. Yeah. So anyway, so she did an interview and an article. So I just shared hers. I was like, FYI, this is the hell we are living right now. And through that, it opened up and everyone's DMing me and messaging me. And so now I'm like, okay, here we come, advocacy.
But there's a great moment in that though, right? Finding your community like that, because you do feel so alone.
Yes.
When you're dealing with something like this as a parent, it can be just so scary. So give me an idea of sort of how large this community is. Do you have sort of I mean, you told me I think 1 in 200 right now children will be diagnosed with this. Okay.
Well, I don't know if diagnosed is the right term.
Or-
It's affected.
Okay.
Affected.
Okay. So
Diagnosed
not
is probably like 1
right.
in 2,000.
So there's an education
Yeah.
that has to happen for doctors as well,
time.
general practitioners,
Yeah.
right? Because this is a relatively new.
It is,
In
the
the
80s.
90s.
Yeah, 80s,
Or-
90s.
Yeah.
Okay. So your child is still taking antibiotics.
Yep.
Are your children still taking antibiotics? Okay.
We're not in any flares right now, thank God.
Okay. So when a flare happens,
Yes.
are there antibiotics?
Yeah.
Always.
No.
Okay. So what other treatments have you sought
Yes.
to help with this?
I did like you too. I went to a naturopath right off the bat and spent $400 on a whole bunch of stuff.
Yep.
And it was really challenging because they're so young, these kids. They don't want to be taking a slew of medications and pills and things that aren't making them feel better right away. We were leading a pretty healthy diet. For the most part, they still snack on crap. But so I didn't really want to change. I hear you're doing the gluten-free, which a lot of people try.
Yeah. She's already been gluten-free anyway,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a huge shift for her.
Yeah,
But yeah.
a lot of people try that. And then I started to get, at the same time as my youngest being diagnosed in 2015, my mom was a palliative patient, and she wanted to get off of all of her medications. So she inquired to me, knowing that I was a recreational cannabis user. She said, "Hey, Leslie, what can you tell me about it medically?" So we went to our family doctor and got her a prescription. And it triggered me then. I was like, wait a minute. If I knew that people with Tourette's could use cannabis for tics. So I was like, why, if my kid's brain is inflamed, why can't CBD oil, this magical oil that kids in the States and Charlotte's Web oil, that it's helping kids with epilepsy and Dravet, why can't that help my daughter too? So, because my son at the time wasn't flaring. So I went back to my family doctor and I said, I knew he was supportive of medical cannabis because he'd just given my palliative mom a prescription. So I said, I want to know more about it for my daughter. And he said, well, you can't even get it legally as an oil yet. So I was in the position where I went mama bear, and I started I had my own medical cannabis prescription for interstitial cystitis. So I started going to any event my licensed producer would hold. And through that, I connected with moms that were treating their kids with Dravet syndrome. So I met Mandy McKnight and other great leaders in the pediatric cannabis world that were making their kids cannabis oil out of the flower, sending it off to a laboratory to be tested, and then having it come back and treating their kid with that.
Okay.
I connected with them. They said, you got to try this. So as soon as medical cannabis was legal in oil form, I convinced our pediatrician, who's would you say original PANDAS specialist?
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get in with one of the greatest doctors, and she agreed to prescribe CBD oil to Piper when she was only 3, and
Right.
it worked within a day.
And CBD is the medical component
Yeah.
of cannabis. It's not
Yeah.
the THC.
Yeah, they're all cannabinoids. THC and CBD are both cannabinoids, but there's lots of different ways people like to say THC gets you high, CBD doesn't. The THC is the fun molecule, CBD is the boring one. You know, it's the one that is notorious for reducing inflammation.
And reducing inflammation to me sounds like this is the key in this, right? Is all inflammation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and it worked. So we used that in conjunction with antibiotics until we weaned off antibiotics. And then since, she's 7 now, so for 4 years, we've been using CBD as a frontline defense. It's not a magic oil. It doesn't work with every flare, and it doesn't work with every child.
It's not going to work with every child, right?
But it does work sometimes, and it does take the edge off. So we can use it in situations where we don't want to use Advil, which also works on the endocannabinoid system. So that's why those are both working the same way. And it just gives a tool in our toolkit, to be honest with you.
Right.
I will definitely be looking into this. We have another meeting on coming up with our doctor, and I'm going to bring this up too. I bet
It wouldn't be the first time they've heard of it.
Yeah.
So you talk to a lot of moms in this space then. So what are what's what are you looking at? Is this long-term, effects? Are you looking at, obviously
grow
your
out of
son,
it. My
right?
son's getting better. He hasn't flared in a while, knock on wood. He just turned
Okay.
15 this
Okay.
past week. And he does have some transient tics that have, I think, stuck with him. But they're not terrible.
So it's not necessarily a lifetime
No, it's pediatric.
affliction,
Yeah, it's
right?
pediatric.
It's 2 to 13, I read,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so they grow out of it after 13?
I hope so.
I see online some that have flared, they get a bad strep or get a tick bite and flare at 18. Once you have an autoimmune condition, you usually roll into another autoimmune condition or, it's one thing after another, sadly. But it's encephalitis of the brain.
I actually
That's all
read
it
that
is.
they're proposing, so Sydenham, Korea, and PANDAS are two encephalitis conditions. They're considering renaming it just basal ganglia encephalitis. And they might just lump it together and give it that name. That's what I read.
That would be great.
But yeah, I hope that they grow out of it. But I think what I'm learning for myself is at first, like I said, I was hoping this would just be, oh, she has a flare this episode, we're going to get through it, back to life is normal. Nothing about our life is normal now. And it won't be. This has changed the course of our lives, of how we're going to parent, and how like my career might have to change and be more flexible, because if these flares, how often are they going to come? Sometimes, like I've heard some parents, they're like, we've just had one, and then we went 3 or 4 years and didn't have another one. Then I've heard other parents, they're like, we've had 3 this year.
Yeah.
So I don't know what our future holds. It's made me, rethink a lot of things.
Schools are gross.
Yeah, schools are disgusting. My daughter has been out of school. I've looked into homeschooling.
Many PANDAS parents do.
That might have to be our reality. She's very social, and I know that that's the myth of homeschooling or unschooling, that they're not socialized, but it would break my heart in some ways for her not to have a peer group she sees every single day, because she's like an extreme extrovert. But if her health, if it comes to that, we will figure it out.
Right.
And this isn't something that's just going to be, one and done, goodbye. Dietary changes, lifestyle changes, environmental things, and for our whole family, because I also too have the fear that my son could be affected.
Yeah.
Gut health, learning about that a lot.
So important.
The microbiome. I will say my daughter was on, I won't say a brand name for fear of any kind of, wrist slapping from your radio station, but she was on a supplement that would help her with bowel movements every day, prescribed by her doctor. And
I know of which supplement you're speaking.
Yep. It's there's a class action lawsuit in the US right now against the parent company. And I even talked to our doctor about it. I was like, could this? And he said, it alters your microbiome. So it's not saying this causes PANDAS, but it really messes stuff up and just leaves you wide open. You know what I mean? It really, so your microbiome is so important. You need to protect it. Inflammation, gut health. We always we cook and bake ourselves everything from bread. So we already ate pretty healthy, not a lot of processed foods, but we're being even more strict, because I think that you come at it from all angles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So parents are listening to this, and what would you say to them? What should they watch for? Sort of what would set off red flags for them immediately?
I immediately want to say overnight change, but it's not the right thing to say, because it's not necessarily always the case. But a change in your child's demeanor that is wrong, I would say. Trust your gut. If you know that your kid is acting differently than their personality is, then trust your gut, because it's not necessarily always an overnight onset.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of parents have asked me that they say, how did you know it was OCD? Because it can be tics and or OCD.
Okay.
It's not always OCD. It's not always tics.
Yeah.
It can be one or the other or both. So I have it here for you. I looked this up. So Kids Health Org. OCD is a condition that causes kids to have unwanted thoughts, feelings, and fears. These are called obsessions, and they make kids feel anxious. To relieve the obsessions and anxiety, OCD leads kids to do behaviors called compulsions. So OCD, it's the thoughts, the unwanted, intrusive thoughts. So for us, I knew that wasn't my kid. So that's knowing what OCD looks like, and kind of I think education on that front is not just about things being neat and orderly or germs and washing your hands. It's the thought. And yeah, trust your gut. You know your kid. Don't let the medical profession, if one doctor doesn't believe you, go to another one. Go to another one. Go to another. You are your child's advocate, and like, time is ticking. This is urgent. This needs to be triaged as an urgent situation. And so seek the help and just reach out and find other parents too for support.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I think one thing that's really important, having been in the PANDAS trenches for 5 years, or I guess it is 5 years now, is it's so important to take care of yourself. It is so important to take care of yourself.
Put your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah. I didn't realize how fast it happened fast for me, and I burnt out, and I had major caregiver PTSD, where anything that my kid, if anybody said that they had a sore throat, I would tremble physically. I just, the panic was terrible. So it's so important for parents to recognize, and for their support groups to recognize, that this is a real problem in these families, and to make sure that the parents and the other siblings are okay as well.
Other siblings. It's been huge for me having friends reach out and say, does your son want to have a play date? Can I take your son because he needs a break when you're in a flare? And like, so having friends out there that will take your other kid, and even having friends out there that are willing to have a play date with someone that you might have to cancel on at a moment's notice, or things are going south fast and we just got to get the heck out of here. Sorry, we've been here for 15 minutes, but having people there that can support you, because it's so isolating when you're in a flare, especially. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today. This has been really enlightening, and I know it will help other parents out there just to know about this, right? Even just knowing about it and having it on your radar. There's a lot as parents we have to know. I mean, and I'm sure you didn't suspect this at any point, right? Right. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be back with another What She Said podcast.
Thanks, Candace.
Thank you.